On this Sunday night, out-of-control wildfires. The flames flaring up in BC.
In the past 3 days, we have had 73 new fire starts.
And the catastrophe that sent thousands of Californians running from their homes. Florida boards up and hunkers down for Isaias. How Canada could be next in the storm's path. Mysterious trend. What's happening with COVID-19 in developing nations? And if these walls could talk.
She wouldn't come in the tunnels for anything.
One community's historic hidden gem.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight in BC, where firefighters are battling dozens of wildfires. Most of them were sparked over the past 48 hours. As Heather Yourex-West explains, after a relatively slow start to the fire season, lightning and high temperatures are now fueling the threat.
The Green Mountain Fire on Vancouver Island is currently burning out of control. Just one of many new fires sparked by lightning across the province in recent days.
We did start out with a very quiet fire season compared to the most recent seasons. In the past 3 days, we have had 73 new fire starts.
While about half of those fires were quickly contained, more than 40 continue to burn. The Sokol Creek fire in the Okanagan is one of the largest right now. Like Green Mountain, it is also out of control, as soaring temperatures and intense summer storms help add fuel to the flames.
About 45% of wildfires across our country are started by lightning. And when you see that dry lightning, so that's thunderstorms rolling through without a lot of precipitation to help with the moisture in the soil, that is going to allow for perfect conditions for wildfires to occur.
The fire was basically right here.
The fire season began early in BC. This was the scene in the Squamish Valley back in April. Forecasts at the time called for a well above average forest fire season across much of Western Canada. But a rainy June turned things around. Across the West, the risk of wildfires right now is actually low. It's only when you reach parts of Manitoba and Ontario that risk begins to rise. But as the last few days have shown, low risk or not, fires can start at any time.
We're definitely not in the clear. We can't get complacent just because of kind of what we've had up until this point. The risk is still there.
And with more heat and lightning forecast for the next week, BC fire officials are bracing for more busy days to come. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
A wildfire in Southern California has forced more than 7,000 people from their homes. It began as two separate fires Friday evening between Los Angeles and Palm Springs. The flames quickly joined together to form what is now known as the Apple Fire. The fire has consumed more than 6,000 hectares of dry brush and timber. Hundreds of firefighters are trying to contain the out-of-control flames. At least one home has been destroyed. The U.S. Weather Service says dangerously hot, dry, and windy conditions are expected to continue. Tropical Storm Isaias may not be the mighty hurricane it once was, but it's still packing a punch as it inches toward Florida. Thousands of people are without power, and the governor is warning residents to stock up on a week's worth of essentials, water, food, and medicine. As Jennifer Johnson reports, Canada is expected to be the storm's next target.
Gusty winds and heavy rain move into Florida as the state takes another hit in an already difficult year, this one from Isaias.
Everyone should be safely staying at home. Do not go out unless you really need to.
Special shelters have been set up, mainly in hotels, for COVID-19 patients in case they have to evacuate.
You must be honest when you come in and the questions are asked. Please answer them honestly, because you're not only continuing to jeopardize your own physical health, but you're now jeopardizing others.
Emergency operations officials hope the storm doesn't intensify, so many of their workers can monitor things remotely.
Heaven forbid, worst case scenario, it's a little bit worse than you expected. Some things go the wrong way on you, and then all of a sudden your whole staff comes down and has to be isolated for 14 days. That's kind of a horror show situation.
For some Floridians, this is another blow in an already terrible year. But for others, the hurricane season almost gives them a sense of normalcy.
I have to admit, this is probably the calmest I've felt considering all the other stuff that's going on in the country. So in a weird way, it's almost a sense of relief because it's somewhat normal for people who live in South Florida, have to pay attention to it.
The rain is expected to create storm surges up to 1.2 meters along most of the eastern seaboard.
The storm turned much more inland, which increases the threat of heavy rain, tornadoes, and flash flooding.
Atlantic Canada will feel the effects too.
Isaias will start to lose some of its tropical characteristics as it takes a turn to the northeast this week towards Canada, likely reaching close to New Brunswick by Wednesday, where it could deliver some locally heavy rain and some gusty winds.
Officials are asking people not to drive in flooded waters, and if they have to shelter with other people, keep physically distancing. As this pandemic goes on, any storm now has the potential for creating more than just weather-related hazards. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
A state of disaster has been declared in Australia's Victoria state, where COVID-19 has come back with a vengeance. The state reported one of the highest number of daily cases, 671, and 7 new deaths. The struggle to trace community outbreaks has triggered some of the harshest restrictions to date. An 8 p.m. curfew has been ordered in the city of Melbourne.
And the only reason to be out of your home between the hours of 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. is to get care, to give care, or to go to and from work or be at work. Police will be out in force and you will be stopped and you will be asked and you will need to demonstrate that you are lawfully out and that you are not breaching that curfew.
The restrictions will also require residents to stay within 5 kilometers of their homes for essential shopping or exercise. Melbourne was already under a 6-week lockdown. Officials say these new rules will be in place for another 6 weeks. Despite the pandemic, some international cruises are back on the water, and already at least one ship is reporting an outbreak of COVID-19. 40 people, mostly staff, from a Norwegian luxury cruise liner have tested positive. Health officials expect that number to rise. The company is being criticized because it let almost 400 passengers disembark in northern Norway before learning about the test results. That's triggering fears the virus could spread further into the community. Demonstrators in Israel are accusing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of mishandling the coronavirus crisis and calling on him to resign. Thousands took to the streets outside Netanyahu's residence last night. It was reportedly the largest protest to date, calling for the embattled leader to step down. Netanyahu has been facing weeks of nationwide protests over the state of the economy. Demonstrators say he's unfit to lead while facing trial for corruption charges. Today, Netanyahu accused the media of fueling the demonstrations. Testing shortages are making it difficult to understand the true toll of COVID-19 in developing countries. Many are reporting lower death rates than richer nations, adding to the mystery. Redmond Shannon looks at how demographics and data collection may explain the different curves.
South Africa reaching the grim landmark of 500,000 cases is no surprise. But what is remarkable is the relative low apparent death rate there. In Canada, more than 7% of confirmed COVID-19 cases have died. That figure is even higher in many Western nations. But in South Africa, it's less than 2%. The figure almost as low in places like Nigeria and India. One issue is that poorer countries are unable to test enough.
Unfortunately, due to the global demand, particularly for test reagents, we haven't been able to meet our full testing capacity.
But low testing would suggest the reporting of deaths is vastly underestimated too.
70% of deaths in India occur in the rural areas, and 70% don't have any certification. They don't have a death certificate. We might have a hidden epidemic of elderly people in rural areas dying from COVID that are just missed because of the lack of death certification.
Fewer airline links to poorer countries may be helping them to react more effectively, flattening the curve or maybe just delaying it.
I'm very concerned right now that we're beginning to see an acceleration of disease in Africa.
Another theory is some sort of immunity in less developed countries.
A sort of hygiene hypothesis that countries that have worse general infectious disease burden may perhaps have some cross-immunity that makes them less susceptible to COVID-19.
There's a general consensus younger populations in Africa and Asia are keeping death rates lower, but without more testing, it's difficult to know.
The only way for India to walk out of this pandemic will be with much better data.
When accounting for all untested cases worldwide, the actual death rate from COVID-19 is thought to be under 1%, but it could be years until we really know how much that varies and why. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
One of India's best-known film stars has recovered from COVID-19. Bollywood superstar Amitabh Bachchan has returned home after spending 3 weeks in hospital. The 77-year-old was admitted with his actor's son, who is still in hospital. Bachchan's granddaughter and daughter-in-law, Aishwarya Rai, also contracted the virus. They were discharged after a 10-day hospitalization. Posting the news on Twitter, the actor praised the hospital's excellent care.
You know, when I was a kid and got a hold of a nickel, I thought I was rich.
And actor Wilfred Brimley has died. He was perhaps best known as the face of Quaker Oats and as a spokesperson for diabetes education. Brimley began his career as a stunt rider, working his way up to star in hit movies including Cocoon, The Natural, and The Firm. He also made TV appearances with guest spots on shows like Seinfeld and a starring role on the 80s drama series Our House. Brimley was 85 years old. A deadly shark attack causes alarm along the Atlantic. Coming up, why scientists say Canadian swimmers don't have to worry. Plus, from liftoff to splashdown, 2 astronauts wrap up a landmark mission. South Korea has been hammered by days of torrential rain, and more rain is in the forecast. The deluge triggered deadly floods and landslides and left a wake of destruction around Seoul. Officials say 360 people in the area are now homeless. The death toll stands at 6, but that could change because several people are missing. A fatal shark attack off the coast of Maine has swimmers on edge all along the eastern seaboard. It happened near a popular holiday spot just off the mainland and not all that far from Canada. Investigators confirm it was a great white shark. Recent sightings of great whites in northern Atlantic waters indicate its population is on the rise. But as Ross Lord reports, scientists argue the vulnerable species has been unfairly demonized.
When a woman was attacked and killed Monday while swimming with her daughter, it was shocking. Even more so when officials in the Maine community of Harpswell identified the attacker.
We were able to recover a fragment of a tooth, and with that fragment, Mr. Scommel was able to positively identify this as a great white shark.
Authorities say 63-year-old Julie Demperio Holowak was wearing a black wetsuit. They suspect the great white might have mistaken her for a seal. News that could have a ripple effect of fear when you consider the endangered great white's population in the North Atlantic seems to be increasing. Satellite tracking data indicates white sharks are a more common and consistent occurrence in Canadian waters than previously thought. Scenarios include that tagging technology is revealing the presence of great whites that were already there, or that climate change is making southern U.S. waters too warm, causing the sharks to move north in the summer months.
If we have an occurrence of white sharks in Atlantic Canada waters, then I think there is obviously an increased chance of human-shark conflict.
There's no official estimate of great white numbers. Some scientists believe the population has grown slightly in recent decades.
The risk is very low.
This fisheries and oceans scientist says in the past 80 years, there are only 2 documented shark attacks in the North Atlantic.
There's never been a fatal attack in Canada. When you consider the number of beachgoers, how much we enjoy the ocean, boats, kayakers, really, it's even rare to see the animals, let alone interact with one.
Which means beachgoers might be better off watching out for other threats.
The majority of the risks for me, and for most of us out here, it's other surfers. So it's other buddies in the water, it's boards flying around, that kind of stuff.
Secure in the knowledge, the odds of encountering a great white are still a long shot. Ross Lord, Global News, Lordstown Beach, Nova Scotia.
2 astronauts are back on Earth, ending an historic 2-month mission with SpaceX.
200 meters.
brace for splashdown.
NASA's Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken successfully splashed down off the coast of Florida this afternoon. They left the International Space Station late last night. The landing wraps up an ambitious test of the first manned private spacecraft, which launched in May. Still ahead, the triggers behind America's gun sales surge during the pandemic.
You're watching Global National.
Gun sales across the United States have reached record highs since the pandemic began. In some states, shops selling these weapons are considered an essential service. And even when other states tried to shut them down, there was still the internet. As Reggie Cicchini reports, a growing number of buyers are first-time gun owners.
As more Americans find themselves sinking under the fear of the unknown, millions have sought safety in the palm of their hands.
It started with COVID, and now it's the riots.
Pandemic panic has triggered a rush on gun purchases since the beginning of the year, and data shows it's not gun aficionados looking to arm themselves. 40% of gun sales were to first-time buyers.
I've been wanting to do this for a while, but this is kind of like the tipping point where I need to protect myself.
Roughly 14 million background checks were conducted between March and June. June alone saw a 136% increase from the previous year. These are the highest numbers in the FBI's background check program 22-year history.
It might be something that produces disorder or perceived as disorder. It might be the Black Lives Matter demonstrations and counter demonstrations.
By the beginning of the summer, gun permits in Georgia tripled from 2019 and doubled in Oklahoma, New York, Illinois, and Minnesota. Sales of handguns are outpacing long guns 2-to-1.
It's linked to self-protection. It's survival related.
And while some criminologists say bursts of sales are not generally followed by increased gun violence, gun control advocates disagree.
Gun violence is a public health epidemic. Buying a gun will not make you safer now nor in the future.
The economic situation in the U.S. has left millions of Americans out of work. Studies show that increases the risk of death by suicide amongst gun owners by as much as 30%.
The damage that you're going to cause and the risk you're taking for yourself and your family by this momentary decision could last a long time.
The current health crisis and national protests are not the only reason for the increase. The looming election has also sparked fears among gun owners that new gun controls could be on the horizon. A similar run on guns happened just before the election of Barack Obama.
The moral of the story is use background checks to differentiate the good guys from the bad guys and keep guns away from the bad guys.
At a time of unprecedented crisis, more Americans are seeking safety and comfort in their constitutionally protected right to bear arms. Reggie Cicchini, Global News, Washington.
Up next, the legacy of one of Canada's oldest churches after it was lost to history. Pilgrims in Mecca walked 7 laps around the Kaaba, the most sacred structure in Islam, as they took part in the final ritual of Hajj known as Tawaf. The holy site usually sees millions from around the world stand shoulder to shoulder for this pilgrimage. The pandemic has forced it to scale down, with just a select few living in Saudi Arabia allowed to take part while maintaining distance. Many Canadians are having to rejig travel plans this summer. Fortunately, there's much to explore in our own country. Canada has over 1,500 national historic sites. One took Mike Armstrong off the beaten path. It's a few minutes north of Highway 401 between Montreal and Ottawa on the Ontario side of the border. That's where Mike found the ruins of one of the oldest churches in Canada.
These stones have stood for 2 centuries, the walls of what was a hub not just for this hillside hamlet, but for the entire region. Now, they have a joke about the name of this church. If you're saying it right, then you're saying it wrong. It's spelled St. Raphael, but it's pronounced St. Raphael. Well, when it was built, Glengarry County was the eastern tip of Lower Canada. Scottish settlers started construction in 1815. It was completed in 1821.
We talk about the seating. There was it would hold 1,000.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
David Anderson is the archivist for the group that's worked to conserve the site. He says when St. Raffles was built, that old road out front was an important thoroughfare.
This was built to be right on the throat of the Great Highway of the Canadas between Toronto and Montreal. Stagecoaches ran down that street out there, Dundas Street, every day.
Now, there are theories about what happened, but no one knows for sure. On a warm night 50 years ago this month, someone passing noticed a glow in an upper window. There was a fire in the roof.
They called the fire department right away.
8 generations of Bernie McCullough's family had gone to St. Raffle.
In this old building with all them old timbers, there was nothing the fire departments could do. Like, they came from all over. They came from Alexandria, Williamstown, Martintown, and all the departments came.
You're just not going to win that fight.
They're not going to win that. You know, it's something that was that old.
What had been so important for so long, 150 years, was reduced to rubble, and the insurance didn't come close to covering the loss. Well, in the 90s, the community banded together to protect the site. Donations and fundraising paid to stabilize it, and in 1999, it was made a National Historic Site.
This church means so much to me.
For Diana Sturkenbaum, that's meant protecting the memories of the building where she was baptized, delivered her speech as valedictorian, and where she was married 57 years ago this week.
I just love when I come up here and someone starts asking questions about the history of the church, and I just love sharing it with others. The French one?
With the anniversary of the fire coming up, it isn't the loss they'll be focusing on. It'll be the history and the pride that they were able to protect it. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Williamstown, Ontario.
And that is Global National for this Sunday. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, Your Canada is the Old Canfor Sawmill in Wavenby, BC. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.